$3.80 billion. That was the number splashed across global headlines in 1999, a figure so staggering it felt fictional. The largest divorce settlement in history, awarded to a woman whose face had become once iconic and almost unrecognizable. She had married into a family whose business depended on absolute invisibility. You see, old money plays by quiet rules when it comes to scandal. Avoid it completely, or, if you can't, silence it immediately. And for 4 generations, the Wildenstein family did just that, building a multi-billion-dollar art empire while staying so hidden. Most people had never even heard their name. Yet they dealt in the world's most priceless works: Rembrandt, Van Gogh, Cézanne, selling to dictators, oligarchs, and collectors who paid not only for the paintings, but for discretion. Offshore trusts, Caribbean, shell companies, secret vaults scattered across continents. That was their fortress, until a marriage that began with a lion hunt in Kenya ended with a Russian model, a 9 pistol, and Manhattan criminal court. In this story, we uncover what the family could no longer hide, and what it cost them not just billions, but the one thing they'd spent a century protecting: silence. Jocelyn Wildenstein was not born into money. She was born in Lausanne, Switzerland, the daughter of a sporting goods store manager. Her childhood was modest, comfortable, perhaps, but utterly ordinary, the kind of life that never brushes against power, unless by accident. But Jocelyn never planned on staying ordinary. Even as a young girl, she understood the unspoken truth of the world. You don't have to be born into wealth to live inside it. If you learn how to become someone they let in. Her transformation didn't come all at once. It began in the shadows, learning languages, mimicking the elite, sharpening her appearance, refining her poise. She dated a Swiss filmmaker, Sergio Gobbi, who introduced her to a network of European creatives. From there, she moved to Paris. Then came the circles of Adnan Khashoggi, the Saudi arms dealer whose parties blurred the lines between royalty, crime, and unimaginable money. And it was Khashoggi who gave her the key. He introduced her to Ol Jogi Ranch, a 66,000-acre wildlife reserve in Kenya, recently acquired by the Wildenstein family, who had purchased 49% and were slowly turning it into a private African kingdom. This wasn't just a safari. It was an audition. And Jocelyn passed. She met Alec Wildenstein, heir to the empire, born into privilege, bound to secrecy, and raised with one instruction: protect the family name at all costs. One day, a lion became a problem on a neighboring ranch. Jocelyn asked to join the hunt. Alec said yes on one condition: as long as you keep your mouth shut. She did, and she impressed him with her reign. But more than that, she impressed the entire dynasty with her silence. Within a year, they were married in Las Vegas. No diamond miners, studded spectacle. No society gala. Just a quiet elopement that bypassed the family's official approval. Some say Jocelyn signed a prenuptial agreement that stripped her of all future claim to the family's wealth. What she stepped into was unimaginable. What she didn't know was how much it would eventually cost her. After their sudden elopement in Las Vegas, Jocelyn was no longer just a wife. She was now a Wildenstein. She stepped into a world of curated silence and untraceable wealth, a life more choreographed than lived. It was just private jets and penthouses. It was an entire system designed to insulate power from exposure. Her days unfolded in a rhythm most people would never comprehend. There were dinners where the wine bill alone could fund a college education. Fresh flowers arrived daily, replaced before they could wilt. Dresses were custom-minus fitted, then worn once and forgotten. Calls to Manhattan, Paris, Geneva constant, costly, never questioned. Even her grooming was luxury. Flawless skin, hair, manicures, massages, all maintained like a sculpture on display. They lived in 5 homes at once, scattered across continents. A French chateau older than the Eiffel Tower. A towering penthouse overlooking New York. A townhouse where Jocelyn's staff reported to her, but the floor above answered to Alec's brother. And then there was Ol Jogi Ranch, her husband's, African Eden. Thousands of acres, artificial lakes, exotic animals, and an entire mansion built just for their daughter's birthday. A gift, a gesture, a monument to indulgence. But inside this magnificent world, something subtle and brutal was happening. Jocelyn was being watched, managed. She was a wife, yes, but also an accessory to the Wildenstein name, a symbol to be displayed, not to be heard. So, she did what women in those spaces often do. She adapted. She played her part, but slowly, quietly, she began to change. It started with small procedures. A lift here, an adjustment there. Then came the stories. That Alec obsessed with the big cats, and O.L. Jogi wanted her to look more feline. That she was molding herself into the image of something he loved. She denied it. He later claimed Alec, obsessed with the big cats populating old Jogi, had encouraged his wife. Felines he collected, her eyes tilted upward. Her jawline hardened. The woman, who had once been called beautiful, was now something else entirely. And while her face was changing, so was the marriage. Alec grew distant. Jocelyn spent more. He flirted publicly. She smiled privately. They lived like royalty, separate, guarded, rehearsed. And as the cracks deepened, the world began to watch. Not because they saw what was breaking, but because they could no longer look away from what she was becoming. By the late 1992s, their marriage was no longer a union. It was a cold performance, held together by contracts, reputation, and the quiet terror of what exposure might cost. They still lived in the same townhouse on East 64th Street, a multi-level fortress in the heart of Manhattan. But Jocelyn and Alec had become ghosts in each other's lives. She spent. He disappeared. He entertained. She endured. From the outside, nothing had changed. Behind closed doors, everything was broken. Until the night that made silence impossible. September 3rd, 1997. Jocelyn returned home unexpectedly. She had no entourage, no announcement, just a quiet intuition that something was wrong. What she found shattered what little remained. Alec was in their marital bed with a 21-year-old Russian model. The woman's name was Yel, in a G-cover. She was young, blonde, smiling, and Jocelyn was not alone. She had brought 2 bodyguards with her. What happened next would end up in police reports, courtrooms, and every New York tabloid by morning. Alec, furious, exposed, cornered, reached for a 9 pistol. He pointed it not only at Jocelyn, but at the bodyguard standing beside her. The moment turned from betrayal to violence. The next day, Jocelyn filed for protection. A Manhattan judge granted her a restraining order and full rights to remain in the home. Alec was removed by court order, a Wildenstein heir, ejected from his own townhouse. He spent the night in jail. The headlines exploded. Public view. But this was only the beginning. The real war wasn't about infidelity. It wasn't about a mistress, or a gun, or even the townhouse. It was about what Jocelyn had dared to do next, break the silence, and demand a share of the empire. And for that, the family would retaliate in a way that was quiet, calculated, and devastating. The Wildenstein mess didn't just fight. They retaliated with the same precision. They used to hide billions in art. Because Jocelyn hadn't just filed for divorce. She had committed the one unforgivable sin in the world of old money. She made their secrets public. The isolation came first. Her monthly allowance, once $150,000, was cut to $50,000 overnight. All her credit cards were cancelled. Her accountant was fired. Her household staff instructed to ignore her. Locks were changed. Combinations reset. She was barred from O.L. Jogi Ranch, even though her ailing mother was still there under care. Everything around her began to vanish, quietly, cruelly. It wasn't about money. It was about control. But Jocelyn didn't back down. She hired a legal team. She went to war. And in doing so, she forced the Wildenstein into a place they'd avoided for 4 generations. Open court. Their defense was bold and absurd. They claimed Alec Wildenstein earned just $100,000 a year, working as an unpaid assistant to his father. That every property, every plane, every painting belonged not to Alec, but to the family trust. On paper, Alec was nearly broke. But Judge Marilyn Diamond was fooled. She saw the bank statements. The $250,000 minus dollar monthly expenses, the company documents Selleck had signed, the shell companies, the art transfers, the offshore rusts. He was just spending money. He was moving it, controlling it, hiding it. And Jocelyn, she was done being quiet. The judge called Alex's financial claims an insult to the intelligence of the court. She opened a discovery process that reached across borders to the Cayman Islands, Luxembourg, Switzerland. Vaults were opened, paintings were appraised. And for the first time ever, the Wildenstein empire had a flashlight pointed into its shadows. What the court found was staggering. To previously unknown shell companies, artworks, falsely valued. A Velasquez in the divorce settlement turned out to be a forgery. And the deeper they dug, the clearer it became. The empire was just hiding money. It was hiding lies. In 1999, the court ruled. Jocelyn Wildenstein was awarded to $50 billion, plus $100 million a year for 13 years, a total approaching $3.80 billion, the largest divorce settlement ever recorded. But even that came with a final twist of control. The judge added a clause. Jocelyn was forbidden to use the money for plastic surgery. It was a small sentence, but it spoke volumes. On paper, Jocelyn Wildenstein had won. She had taken on one of the wealthiest, most secretive dynasties in the world, and walked away with a fortune that made history. But the fortune was a lie. Much of the settlement was paid in assets she held and liquidate, paintings, property, and complex trust arrangements designed more to protect the Wildensteiness than to enrich her. Some of the artworks, once valued in the tens of millions, turned out to be forgeries. Others sold for fractions of their alleged worth. What looked like a $3.80 billion victory soon began to crumble in her hands. Then, Alec died. In 2008, prostate cancer ended his life. By 2015, those payments were terminated completely. Her final check? Just $111,000. The family trust claimed Alex's death had ended the agreement. Jocelyn had no legal recourse, and the silence returned. But this time, it wasn't enforced. It was the silence of someone being erased. Her properties began to disappear. The luxury condos at Trump World Tower became unmanageable. Maintenance fees, taxes, debt. She tried to hold on. But in 2018, she filed for bankruptcy. Her checking account had $0. Her car, a 2006 Bentley, was worth $35,000. Her wardrobe, once worth hundreds of thousands, was now valued at just $1,000. She owed over $4.60 million to banks, creditors, and attorneys, and she survived on less than $900 a month from Social Security. I wasn't ready for it, she admitted in an interview. I thought it would last forever. But in the world she had married into, nothing was ever truly hers. Not the art, not the homes, not the name, and certainly not the money. December 31, 2024. Exactly 20 minus 5 years after securing the largest divorce settlement in recorded history, Jocelyn Wildenstein died. She was 84. No private jets flew in. No art world elites sent condolences. No mention was made by the family that had once made her the face of their scandal. The woman who once commanded headlines, parties, and a supposed $3.80 billion fortune, died quietly, with almost nothing. Her final years were filled with absence. Absent wealth, absent recognition, absent justice. She lived in the shadow of a story that had once consumed the tabloids, but now barely registered a footnote. Her fiancé, Lloyd Klein, remained by her side through it all. The bankruptcy, the lawsuits, the illness. But the empire she had once married into, it never looked back. The Wildenstein dynasty returned to its fortress of silence, and the world moved on. But Jocelyn's story isn't just about wealth lost or surgeries gone too far. It's about what happens when a woman dares to speak inside a system built to keep her quiet. She was invited into power, adored for her beauty, celebrated for her elegance, until the moment she asked for something more permanent than jewelry. A seat at the table, a share of the truth. And for that, she paid with her name, her face, and eventually, everything else. The tabloids called her Catwoman. The courts called her the most expensive ex-wife in history. But in the end, she was a symbol, not of vanity, but of what it cost to survive a world that was never meant to be yours. And maybe that's the question we should all be asking. Was Jocelyn Wildenstein a cautionary tale, or just the only one who refused to disappear quietly? Let us know what you think. And remember, power doesn't always wear a crown. Sometimes it wears silence.